For inviting me tonight, and secondly, and probably more importantly, thank you all very much for turning up. There clearly isn't anything worth watching on the telly this evening. You've probably all heard most of what I'm going to say a few times already tonight, so I'm going to focus on a couple of key things before we get into general breeding stuff. But before I even start, can I have an idea of what sort of birds everybody keeps? So let's start with who keeps budgerigars. 5 or 6. And, canaries. A few more.
106.
106. Foreign finches.
206.
I've already got a couple. 3. Softbills. Parrots.
Parakeets, no.
Parakeets. Who said that? What did I miss?
Roger.
Him over there.
No,
Parakeets.
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 Yeah. Anybody I've offended by not asking the right question?
British?
British? Yes. Phew. So I've only upset one person.
Yeah, only upset me.
Don't worry about him.
Okay.
Before we get underway, very important photographic question, please, from this unexperienced operator up the back here. When I'm zooming in, you're terribly fuzzy. Why isn't it working?
I don't know, it's on automatic.
It's not the camera.
Is it, or have I pushed something I shouldn't? It's not on automatic anymore.
Took the lens, well, take the lens cap off, hello.
No, I can see through.
The button on the very top should say automatic, not but that thing, yeah.
So it's automatic, right, okay.
I'd like to thank my wife and experienced camera person. Anything could happen.
Yeah, I'm just not
Okay.
Off you go.
I'm going to start by talking about what I regard as the two biggest issues in bird keeping. The first one is the biggest killer of birds, or rather the biggest cause of them dying prematurely, which is obesity. And the second one will be the biggest and most common deficiency in birds, which is my favourite ingredient, calcium. But we'll start with obesity because, as I say, it is the biggest killer of birds. It also impacts negatively on breeding results and all sorts of things like that. And the nutritionists will tell you that your birds will eat until their energy requirement is satisfied. Actually, they'll tell you that we'll all eat until our energy requirement is satisfied, and then we'll stop. And the reality is almost all of us prove the lie to that. We don't, we eat more. In the case of your birds, actually what they eat until their protein requirement is satisfied. And if we can feed our birds an adequate amount of protein relative to the amount of energy they get in their diet, then they'll stop eating when their protein requirement is satisfied and they simply don't get fat. So it's actually not a difficult, it's a much easier problem to solve with birds than it is to solve with humans. All we have to do is get the ratio between protein and energy roughly right for our birds, and they will sort it out for themselves. So how do we do that? Well, if you bought yourself well, let's go back a stage. I'm going to use, as my typical seed, I'm going to use millet. And the reason I use millet is because millet's 10% protein, and 10% is a really, really easy number for somebody simple like me to get my head around. So if we imagine that millet's 10% protein, when you look at anybody's formulated parrot pellets, they're probably 17% protein. So there you immediately see a difference, that the experienced nutritionists say that millet's not particularly good for your bird, and their complete pellet is. By the way, I particularly dislike parrot pellets, so I'm only using them as an illustration at this point. So, the real problem though, from your bird's point of view, is that millet at 10%, because of the balance of amino acids, and amino acids that are the building blocks of the proteins, because of the balance of amino acids, actually, for your bird, that millet is only 6% protein. By the way, exactly the same applies to us. Plant proteins have one balance of amino acids, animal proteins like ours and our birds have another set, and basically, effectively, it is 6% protein, which means there's another 80-odd% starch in a millet seed, not very much protein, loads of starch, bird eats it, turns the starch into fat. Now let me explain that 10% and 6% bit. And there are 22 different amino acids in plant proteins and in animal proteins, and that's far too big a number for me, so I'm going to simplify it to 3, and if we say that's one amino acid, that's another amino acid, and that's another amino acid. If we look at a plant protein, it'll look something like that. There are more of these two than there are of this little one. Now, that's all fine for the plant. Now, your bird goes and eats that. And what happens is, very simply, in the digestive system, all of these things are separated into roughly their individual amino acids. And for a plant, if the plant was eating it, they just put it back together again. But your bird's eating it, and your bird will eat these things, and it makes a complete protein here, but it can't finish this one off. So remember I said 10% and 6, well this is 5 and 3, this is basically the right proportions. Your bird cannot use these, they get burnt and wasted, basically. So those are the bits your bird can't use. Now if your bird could make this amino acid, it would be no problem at all, it would just make another one and solve it. But unfortunately, a couple of the amino acids that are very short in plants, but in large supply in birds and animals, are what we call essential amino acids. They can't be made by the bird, they have to be eaten. So the very simplest way to boost the protein level of your food, your bird food, is to stick some of these in. Supplement. Methionine, lysine, there are two main ones. If we add lysine and methionine to your bird's diet, we turn that millet from a usable 6% to a usable 10%. And believe it or not, if your bird can use all of that 10%, that is probably enough for it not to get fat. It's